Why did he have to go to San Francisco in 12 hours? Was he a drug addict? Why did he die? To this day, there are still questions. People still ask questions about the film.
Very unlogical, you know. You can't really understand why would someone crash the car rather than they just stop and get a ticket.
There are subtleties that happened in that film that were a little bit ahead of its time.
There's something just ethereal about that film, and it's almost difficult to articulate.
A friend of mine gave me Vanishing Point, this magical script written by a guy by the name of Guillermo Infante Cabrera, who was Castro's Minister of Information at one time. Guillermo had never been to America except once on a cattle buying trip with Castro, and yet I felt he knew more about the road as Jack Kerouac. And so we brought it to 20th Century Fox, and I pitched it to Richard Zanuck, and Zanuck had only one question. He says, "Richard, does he die at the end?" I said, "Mr. Zanuck," I said, I'm Catholic. I think he makes it." He says, no, Richard, he's got to die.
The most immediate thing was looking at this white muscle car traveling through all these desert scenes and car chases, but I was never someone that was really into car chase films, so there was some other component to it, which I suppose had to be the character.
He was that delivery car driver who was going to do his thing. It was the last thing he could do. He was going to deliver that car. And the world was after him. Everybody was after him. Well, there was no way he was going to stop with the cops. And suddenly, all these people said, he's the rebel, he's the anti-hero.
He doesn't see like a way out, he doesn't see an answer. He's not just a hippie who's fed up. He's been through a lot of stuff.
He comes out of the Vietnam War, a disillusioned cop, motorcycle driver. So the fuse had already been lit, and he was the ultimate rebel against establishment.
The Jaguar scene really stuck out in my mind. And watching these two guys sort of fight it out on the road, and then one guy actually flips over. And it's an open-top car, Jaguar, so you figure the guy probably got hurt. And the main character, Kowalski, stops to make sure that he's okay. And that was interesting to me.
You do care about him. And I think that's important. He is a sympathetic character. Complex, because I don't think Kowalski knew where the hell he was going, knew what he was doing. I don't think he's really thought about that, except the bad guys are after me and I'm not going to give up. It wasn't within him to surrender. His ultimate need was freedom.
I grew up in Poland, which during my upbringing was still under the communist regime. And we were very much restricted from traveling. We were very much restricted from exposure to different ideologies and different cultures. However, the American cinema of '70s, which was the cinema of social unrest, particularly was popular among the Polish officials and Polish censorship, because in their opinion, that was the cinema that would criticize the bourgeois, the capitalistic life of America. So we would get movies such as Vanishing Point. For younger generation, of course, this was automatically a cinema of free men that was embraced by most of the Eastern Europeans. This is the ideology of wanting to change, even to the point that I'd rather be free and die trying than surrender to the authorities. And automatically, that was the cinema that shaped my desire to come to America, and that is the cinema that I've learned about America through.
Easy Rider was released in '69. And it seemed to me that that was another era.
San Francisco, Flower Children, all that whole, wonderful time where the audience and the kids and the music was reaching for freedom.
And suddenly Vanishing Point came along, and that was the beginning of another era.
Vanishing Point was a way of saying goodbye to the '60s. And it was the beginning of a new decade. It wasn't as anti-establishment as the '60s.
Vanishing Point, to me, was a film that reflected even more accurately that generation's sense of feeling disconnected with the world around them. And he's alone, you know. There's something about the solitude, something about how he had to work this all out by himself.
Kowalski was on his own. He was a cowboy. He was doing his thing and riding into the sunset. That's why he was the last American hero. We went from Denver to Aspen, Colorado Springs, all the way through Utah, and we would film all day, and then we'd keep going. I had never really been through the West before, and here we are, you know, seeing those mountains and going in these roads that went on forever. There was a great freedom about it.
Of course, the photography reflected the openness of the landscape, the freedom of being in a car and driving. And that was done very much through visuals, you know, the open road. You could drive for miles and not see the other side. You could drive towards the horizon, and there was always this hope. Maybe there's something new, better on the other side.
John Alonzo, the cinematographer, was really one of the truly responsible guys for bringing that film to fruition.
I would say without Alonzo, I would have been only a half a pair of scissors, because he was able to see the road and the various lighting conditions through my eyes, through my prism. He understood the story and was able to get faces of people, the crowd, standing, staring, looking, you know, which all became part of the mural of events.
It's occasionally very bleak, but occasionally was also very, very entertaining. The whole idea of having a blind disc jockey who's on your side, who's playing amazing music, and who becomes your soulmate, that was the quintessential America.
Super Soul needs no introduction as our #1 disc jockey. Blind leading the blind.
Cleavon Little, his character was Super Soul. In the script, he was Super Spec, sort of in Hispanic. And he was really a takeoff off the Big Bopper. It was the Big Bopper who had the radio station, Super Soul. He was connected to him. They were soul brothers. They were soulmates, the black and the white. Soulmates, merged. He's tried to guide him because he's aware. And he says the blue meanies are on you, you know, chasing him, ready to rape.
The last beautiful free soul on this planet.
I particularly identify with Kowalski. I was one of the rebels, so I wanted to come to America. I wanted to get in the car. I wanted to do drugs. I wanted to ride naked with a woman on the back of a motorcycle.
The nude motorcycle rider. That scene, of course, was one of the scenes that everybody talks about in the movie.
I would have called myself a hippy-dippy chick or a flower child. At the time, in 1970, my boyfriend was Paul Koslow, and he had already got the part. So I tagged along with Paul over to Michael McLean's office, who was the casting director. Then I met Richard Sarafian. They went, "Oh no, we think you should be the nude writer." When I would go to Topanga Beach in the hippie days, some of my friends would be naked. I always had my bathing suit on. That's me, okay? Rather shy. But you sort of get swept up in things, you know, because there's something really exciting about you got a part. We choose you. So I said yes, and then I went away and worried a lot. When I decided that I would do it, I went nude sunbathing over and over and over. So there's a little triangle where a girl's bikini usually is, and it was the first time that skin had ever been exposed to the sun, ever. So by the time I get to Green River, that little triangle of skin was all blistered. I'm sitting on the motorcycle, and Richard Sarafian came over, and I said, "Richard, can you see these blisters?" He said, "Oh." He was glad that I told him what it was, because oh, we pick her. She's a nice, pretty, sort of surfer-looking chick with long blonde hair, and then she takes off her clothes and she's deformed. This was sort of the feeling. He went, "Oh, I'm so relieved that you told me what it was." I was most concerned that I never fall off the motorcycle, because seriously, it was cactus everywhere. I don't think I was very proud of my motorcycle riding. I was very nervous. I did the best I could for a girl with no clothes on. Afterwards, we shot The Shack. Barry Newman told me that it was very hard doing that part with my naked self standing in front of him. And we did take after take after take.
When she's behind the car and he's on the other side of the car and they're talking together. It was shot with great taste.
You gonna stay with us?
No, I don't think so.
Is there something I can do for you?
It was very, very natural. And when you saw in the distance this beautiful young thing, nude, there was a sense of freedom in that scene.
John Alonzo knew how to work fast. And it was always on the run. And it was just hurry, 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 hurry.
We probably have 18 to 20 days to make a movie. You know, you're trying to grab shots, and as you're grabbing the shots, you're zooming in, zooming out, and that becomes something that's really interesting as well.
One sequence in particular was all camera mistakes. We're in a camera car photographing Kowalski with a long focal lens so we can get a close-up of him. So in trying to get that profile shot of Kowalski, the camera was dancing around the car. It would dance, it would come out of white, and find him, focus, find focus, go back to white again. And so all of these were camera mistakes, and out of that, we get a sort of a piece of virtuoso filmmaking, but by accident. This one sequence of high speed with the music and fast cutting, you know, helped create the illusion of that car doing all these tricks.
It's more and more exhilarating. You got that visceral sense of speed and immediacy, and it feels real, you know. So that out of necessity, they invented different language that very rapidly in the 70s was changing the way American movies were made.
In a sense, it's sort of classic 70s filmmaking and how the film looked to me, and a lot of that has to do with how it's shot.
Sarafian had a great eye for what it takes to make a good action sequence. And of course, you also need good stuntmen, and that's why I picked Kerry Lofton to come in and double Kowalski. Not only was he a race driver, but he was probably one of the top stuntmen in the business.
He was fantastic. He did all the heavy stunt driving. Kerry Lofton was like Gary Cooper. You'd say to Kerry, can you take this car, roll it over 3 times, come up 8 feet in front of camera, and he'd say either, yep, or nope. And then they said, let's do it. Kerry would roll over a car and then come up 8 feet in front of camera, and they said, perfect, we got the shot, Kerry. I said, okay. That's the way he was. He was a man of action, not a man of words.
When Kowalski is in the desert and there's a nice little mound there, I said, oh, wow, Kerry, look at this. Maybe we could do a shot where you come up here and hit this ramp and jump it. He said, oh, yeah, let's do it.
Kerry choreographed everything down to the minutest detail. There's no room for failure. Otherwise, you're a dead man.
When it's the spur of the moment, you just cross your fingers and you just stand back. Kerry was taking that thing up to 100 miles an hour.
And here he comes.
I was holding my breath.
And you got your shot.
We all stood there in awe of Kerry.
Challenges couldn't take the wear and tear that we were putting on them. They weren't designed in terms of suspension, the engine itself, and the bumps that it took.
We had a magnificent mechanic there. We called him the surgeon. His name was Max Belkowski. And when one of the cars ran into something, boom, he would be there with another car with his white jacket on. And he was always working on the engine of one, taking parts out of one, putting it in the other.
We burnt up about 8 of them. But it served its purpose and it made it famous.
These cars didn't go around corners, but they were sexy, they were fast, and that film created a mystique about it to me. That particular car, just that white challenge or the starkness of it, black interior, what it was, you know. That kind of made that car important to me.
There was a German scientist by the name of Mobius, whose concept was the elliptical band. You take a ribbon and you attach it together and you twist it. And if you traveled on one side of it, if you kept going, you would traverse both sides. In terms of the design of the picture, I saw as an opportunity within the script in terms of my feeling that, you know, that Kowalski doesn't die, he's just on a journey through this planet, and that we're all on that journey through this planet, each of us at different speeds. See, there is no vanishing point. There is no such thing. It's a very subjective thing. It's like Mobius's elliptical band, you know, we're just traveling that road on both sides of it. And so incorporated in the script are these curved lines, and I use the intersecting lines in a high-angle shot. And there were enough of these moments that I think that where I'm signaling my intent, you know, that there is no end.
last scene when he has that smile. It wasn't that he was accepting his fate. He thinks he can get through.
He sees the light pouring through the crack between these two bulldozers, sees the crack, and he goes for it. The car was supposed to go up in the air, and fortunately, by accident, it didn't. It welded itself to the front blades. It just stuck up in the air like a tower.
Sarafian loved that because the car was, at its end, it was almost like a crucifixion. I sat in a screening at Fox in New York and watched the film. And I was there with all the salespeople. And you know, I said, uh-oh, because the salespeople's wives were sitting there and going, you know, cars and screeching. You know, they wanted to see Joan Crawford and Mildred Pierce. I said, uh-oh, little problem here. The film opened in New York, and a lot of people didn't get it. They shut the film down.
I was now in London, and I found out that Vanishing Point is opening up at Leicester Square. And so we go down there, and here there's lines around the block. I mean, not just one line, 3 lines, and they're playing music. I mean, I couldn't believe it.
It opened in Europe at the Leicester Square Theatre in London. It was the biggest commercial plus critical hit of the decade. It came back to the United States as a second feature to The French Connection. So when people went to see The French Connection, that's how they picked up on Vanishing Point. And then the film had its audience, and it just grew, and it grew, and it grew. And here we are, and people are still talking about that particular film.
The movie wouldn't die. It's still not dead. Here I am. No, not dead. It's still alive.